They mocked her swollen belly, her brown skin, and her uniform, certain she belonged in the shadows, not beneath the chandelier. Yet when billionaire Richard Hale sneered, "Play this violin and I'll pay you $100 million, Naomi Carter stepped forward. A janitor, 7 months pregnant, holding an instrument reserved for royalty, could she turn humiliation into triumph? The bow touched string, the crowd leaned in, and justice prepared to speak in the language of music. The billionaire's voice sliced through the ballroom like a blade. "Play this violin, and I'll pay you $100 million. The words dripped with scorn, bouncing off marble walls and chandeliers. Naomi Carter, 7 months pregnant and wearing a faded janitor's uniform, froze in the spotlight. Laughter rippled through the crowd of suits and gowns. One woman whispered, "She can't even read music." Naomi's hand tightened around the handle of her cleaning cart, her knuckles white, her breath shallow. She had been invisible all night, moving silently between tables, polishing what no one else noticed. Now she was being put on trial. A priceless Stradivarius rested in its velvet case on stage, gleaming under the lights like a weapon waiting to wound her. But Naomi didn't step back. She raised her chin. And the room held its breath. Naomi could feel the heat of 100 stares pressing against her skin, each gaze heavy with doubt. Richard Hale, the billionaire developer who owned the hotel, leaned back in his chair, a cruel smile tugging at his lips. "Come on," he said, his words sharp and deliberate. "Prove you're more than a maid." The crowd chuckled, glasses clinked, and someone muttered, "She'll embarrass herself." Naomi's throat tightened, but she remembered every time she had been told she didn't belong, the scholarship she lost when a professor said her kind lacked discipline, the audition where they laughed at her accent, the internship where she was dismissed before playing a single note. Her baby shifted inside her, a tiny kick against her ribs. She whispered under her breath, "I won't let them take this from us." When she stepped toward the stage, the murmur of voices swelled. A guard blocked her path for a moment, eyeing her swollen belly. She paused, then walked past with steady determination, her shoes clicking against the polished floor. The Stradivarius sat waiting. She reached out, fingers trembling, then steadied. The ballroom went silent. Even the chandeliers seemed to stop swaying. Richard's smirk widened as Naomi lifted the violin to her shoulder. "Careful," he sneered, his voice dripping with mock concern. "That instrument is worth more than your life." The remark drew scattered laughter, but Naomi didn't flinch. She closed her eyes, drew the bow across the strings, and the first note cut through the air like a cry no one expected. It wasn't polished perfection, it was raw, trembling, full of ache. The sound carried her history, long nights practicing in cramped apartments, doors slammed in her face, the bitter sting of rejection because of her skin, her name, her gender. The room stiffened. Fork stopped midair. A man lowered his phone, forgetting to record. Each note grew steadier, deeper, weaving threads of sorrow and strength together. The melody shifted, rising into something defiant, a declaration that her voice could not be silenced. Naomi's eyes glistened, but she never looked away from the chandelier's glow above her. By the time she reached the crescendo, her bow moved with the force of conviction. The mocking faces in the front row softened, their smugness melting into stunned silence. For the first time that night, Richard Hale's grin faltered. The final note lingered in the air, trembling like a secret the room wasn't ready to hear. Then, silence. No applause, no laughter, only the echo of what she had just unleashed. A single glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered against the marble floor, breaking the spell. Suddenly, the audience surged to their feet, not with jeers but with thunderous applause. The sound was overwhelming, a wave that made Naomi's chest tighten with disbelief. Tears blurred her vision as she lowered the violin. Richard Hale sat frozen, his hands clenched on the table, face pale beneath the ballroom lights. He had orchestrated a public humiliation, but the crowd had turned against him. One investor leaned in and hissed, "You promised her $100 million. Everyone heard you." A woman from the press was already scribbling in her notebook, her eyes locked on Hale's expression. Naomi stood still, steadying her breath, her swollen belly rising and falling. She hadn't asked for the bet, but she had won it. And now the billionaire had nowhere left to hide. Richard Hale rose slowly, the weight of every eye in the ballroom crushing him. His voice cracked as he tried to reclaim authority. "This was entertainment," he muttered. But the crowd roared back, "Pay her." The chant swelled, echoing against the gilded ceiling until his excuses collapsed under its force. Finally, he raised a trembling hand. "Fine," he said, the word breaking apart like glass. 100 million. I'll honor it. Naomi didn't gloat. She placed the violin back into its velvet case with care, as if returning a sacred truth to its altar. Dr. Eleanor Reed, who had been silent until now, stepped forward and whispered, "You reminded us tonight that talent doesn't come dressed in a uniform." Naomi looked at her mother, at the strangers who had mocked her minutes ago and now cheered her name. She pressed a hand to her belly and spoke softly, not to the crowd, but to the child within her, "We will never be invisible again." The applause rose once more, this time carrying the weight of justice. And in that grand hall, a janitor's daughter-to-be had already inherited a future built on dignity and music.